interesting conversation. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here. Before we start that, I don't know how many people there are in the audience. I was just wondering whether we could maybe ask some of the audience to tell us how they're feeling right now, because I think it's really quite important that we acknowledge some of the feelings that we do have. And if I may, if I can share the screen here, if that's okay, can I introduce you to something called Menti? Okay, and here we have menti.com. Anybody can, if you're on Facebook or anywhere like that, you can actually access this. And I invite you to basically tell me, yeah, how you're feeling right now, pretty much. Okay, so you can use menti.com. Okay, so it's www.menti.com and use the code 82650715. And then tell me just one word to describe how you are feeling right now. Because I think it's really important that we, learn how to articulate how we are feeling. And if you are able to access this, yeah, thank you. Somebody has written stressed. Anybody else? So anyone can access this, okay? So even if you're watching on YouTube, wherever you're watching, whichever medium, you can actually use this. So some interesting words coming up here. Okay, flustered, stressed, tired are some of the words that are coming up. And if it is a large, you can see it, it's a word cloud. So more people are actually saying stressed. Anything else? Okay, so anyway, so basically this kind of gives us a feeling of, some of the words that we are using, so we are actually quite stressed here. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen to answer your question here. So this last 2 years and 18 months really has been quite a challenge for everyone, and it's been actually global. But in some places it's been far more challenging than in others, because if you have access to something like the internet and so on, there are more opportunities that have opened up for different people. So even the challenges have not really been equal, although the media says it's been a great equalizer. Well, actually it hasn't. Okay, it has been very seriously more challenging for more people than others. And I have to say that for younger people, it really has been quite a task, because many of you have been working from home for most of your year. I mean, I'm thinking maybe 1.5 years, is it? About, so yeah, so half your degree for some of you has been working from home. And when we think about the fact that, going to university isn't just learning about facts or information, it is also about the social context. We are missing out on that. Okay, so that, I think, the social aspect of being together and exchanging, the connections that we have has been one of the biggest casualties in a way, as well as the COVID and the life and death casualties. This has also added to the whole equation here. Okay, and that has been global, and that has not been quite equal, because people who are probably better financially off have actually had means of getting about and so on. So it has really highlighted a lot of the social inequalities around the world. Okay, so I'd like you to understand that it has been really quite a difficult time, and especially for young people, but it hasn't been equal for everyone either. So it's been a difficult time. Chanel, can I? Yeah, that's what I wanted to say here. Yeah, come in if you like. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I'm pretty sure Chanel also has something to share as well.
No, I mean, Dr. Chinta is spot on. I think even in my experience with clinical practice, what I am seeing is a common theme is the lack of control that people are becoming privy to nowadays, right? Because before COVID, it's not that we had much control either, but at least there was a facade of control, so to speak. It's just that now it's more apparent, because there's a pandemic and it's disrupted. It's what we call disruption, right? In terms of how we usually behave and how we usually do things. And as Dr. Chinta said, that whole experience of being a university student, I mean, I know being a graduate from the US, how amazing that feeling is when you get to meet other students, in person, you get to speak to your lecturer in person, you get to really experience what you're studying in real time. And now that's been taken away. And part of being human is being social, right? To a very significant sense. And now that's being disrupted as well. So it's a lot of uncertainty, which is more profound, I think, for people, especially young people who are now, wondering, who am I now? What do I stand for? So there's a lot of questions, which I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but definitely, as Dr. Chinta mentioned, when you're privileged, right? It depends on how privileged you are on the hierarchy, right? So the more privileged you are and the more access you have, it might be easier to manage because, therapy is expensive. Whatever tools you have, you need to have an iPhone. So for example, to like download something like Calm, which is an app for mental health, right? Even to, download something, you need certain finances. And if you think about the average Sri Lankan, they don't have access to what a very small minority has. An iPhone is very expensive for the average Sri Lankan when you really think about it. So how do they navigate digitalization and how to cope in a very productive way? Most people are not really used to the remote thing. If we're just talking about the urban community, the people that are now being entrenched in that kind of society. So I think it's important to be aware, right, of the limitations that we have as a society as well, but also the strengths that we have, like the sense of community, being able to, get together and, help each other with the whole food situation that happened last year, when people were connecting about groceries and, WhatsApp groups and being like, I know this great guy who, sells milk, and that's what community is about. That's what humanity is about. So I think it's definitely shaking that identity, and people just feel very, there is no stability. And I think that's very difficult for us as a species to accept, right? Especially now.
I think that spot on, Dasha, because I think the predictability has gone.
Exactly.
Nothing is predictable anymore. And in a way also, I mean, was there ever predictability? Okay. But the point was, we had that illusion that there was one. So whilst, we are actually pinpointing some of the very negative aspects of what the pandemic has brought to us, it also has brought some other positive things as well. Okay. So, and hopefully during this conversation, we can actually help you to focus on some of the positives rather than just, focusing on the negative, the things that have been taken away, the things that we've lost, but we've also gained some things. And if we had more time, we can have a whole conversation about all the things that we've gained. All right. But hopefully, in this, the time that we've got, some of those things will come out. So hope that answers your question, Shanuka. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. And you brought a couple of interesting points up during the discussion that I agree with as well. The lack of control upfront control in life, and the lack of connection in a way that we are used to. Now, of course, in the sense of a student's life, I think that adds up to the stress of academics as well and adjusting to the situation. For Ms. Almeida, question for you. What do you think students can do to manage and cope with these added stresses and changes in their lives?
So from what I've seen has been most helpful and impactful usually tends to be when you are proactive in solving your problem, right? So now, mind you, we're talking about a lack of control, right? So obviously we need to create a more salient level of control. And how do you do that? By being a bit more present in this current situation. So we have this joke, right, in mental health circles where we say, it's not actually a joke, it's actually very true. Most humor is truth in disguise, by the way. That anxiety exists in the future, depression exists in the past, but happiness and contentment and functionality is in the present. right? So what that means is the human mind loves to take us on a trip, right? And we're very rarely grounded, which is part of being human, right? We love to overthink because we have this amazing brain, right, which is very complex and has the area we call the prefrontal cortex, which is apparently very developed and evolved compared to other animals. I disagree to a certain extent. I think other animals are quite advanced in their own way. But, you know, we're on this hierarchy, right? We're all about power at the end of the day as a species. We love to think that, you know, we are on top and we're dominant in some way. So as a result, we need to give that, we have to make that more tangible for us. So some of the things that, and I know some people might not be very happy with this answer and suggestion, but I genuinely feel that exercise and fitness and movement in some form really does help, right? And that's because your mind and your body are both in sync, right? They have found a lot of research studies, and I'm sure Dr. Chinta can verify this. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that the same chemicals that get ignited during SSRIs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are basically are antidepressants, right? The same effect comes about when you work out or when you move your body. Let's call it movement, right? Because that's more accepting. It's more general. So if you dance, if you do yoga, if you stretch, if anything that uses your body in a way that is active for a considerable amount of time, the recommended amount, as we know, is 30 minutes a day, right? 150 minutes per week. It really does help. And the problem is we procrastinate emotionally, right? Because we think, oh, that's a lot of effort. But the fact is, anyone who does work out daily will tell you, once you start doing it, it's so much easier. And then before you know it, you can't stop. It becomes part of your habit. So I would say fitness is one thing. Somehow just figure it out. Right? I don't care how you do it. Just, you know, integrate working out into your life because it does make a massive difference. I have people who can verify that in my day-to-day practice. It does make a difference, right? Because you feel good, you look good. It has that, you know, two-way effect. Another thing that I will suggest is to learn to, and with law students, I'm sorry, I know you all have a lot of content to process, okay? But part of the reason why it's so intimidating is because the human mind has a lot of thoughts per day. It's approximately 30,000 to 60,000 thoughts on average. So imagine you are thinking about all these other things, plus you have to, I don't know, memorize modus operandi and menstria and all these other lovely words that you all use in Latin, right? And guess what? You might be just going through a breakup. You might be having a history of depression and anxiety genetically, right? So how do you cope with all these issues? One of the best ways is to brain dump or journal in other ways, right? So that is whatever is happening in your mind, you try to put it down on paper, pen and paper, not digital. I recommend to do it actually on pen on paper because when it's digital, blue light can inhibit melatonin, which is important for sleep and all kinds of other issues, right? So try writing the stuff down. What are you really, really struggling with? Most people, and I think it was Seneca who said this, right? He said, you know, our problems are far worse in our imagination than they are in reality. And it's very true, right? Our minds create stories around our problems. And it makes it worse. It's what we call a cognitive bias, namely catastrophizing, right? We catastrophize things. It might actually be a very minute problem, but we exemplify it. So we need to be careful and ensure that whether it's a rational thought or not. So brain dump, write things down. What are you really thinking about? In cognitive behavioral, we refer to them as ants. That is automatic negative thoughts, ants. And usually the human mind loves negativity because it's problem solving, right? We evolved as Homo sapiens to problem solve. That's part of why being a lawyer is so interesting and invigorating because you get to solve problems, right? In the society. So your brain is fabulous. It has all this intellectual capability and cognitive function, but it also has this problematic situation called rumination, which is you overthink and replay the issues in your head until you flip. And then you have anxiety, depression, and stress. So brain dump, try to really identify those ants. Last but not least, I will suggest you incorporate some level of a coping mechanism, right? So exercise can be one way that a lot of people use, but there could be many other things that you can try, like breathing. Now, breathing gets a bad rep because people find it very patronizing, right? Just breathe. Right? But there's actual scientific support for this. When you think about the fear response that is activated by a part of the brain, namely the amygdala, our body goes into fight or flight, right? That is, you eliminate threat. One thing you can do to turn it off is by breathing. Because when you're breathing, the mind realizes that you're taking in more oxygen, and therefore you're not under threat. There is no mountain lion. The only mountain lion is perhaps a difficult paper that you need to study for and perform. So pay attention to this. Are the fears, mountain lions that you are struggling with, real mountain lions, or are they things that you're creating in your head? So it's very important to apply activities and the mental exercises that is required to really challenge your anxiety and cope with them accordingly, right? The only thing I would add is, and Dr. Chinta will probably add her perspective, is to talk to someone. Talk to someone about your problem, whether it's a colleague that can relate to how difficult it is to be a law student at this time, because it really helps, or to connect with someone that you trust, right, that will listen to you. So those are some of the things that we suggest often.
All right, thank you so much. And I do see, and thank you for those insightful comments. And I do appreciate the thought that it's about taking control of the small things that you can and building connections. And as for Dr. Disanaga, I'm sure you have something you want to add to that as well. And in addition to that, could you share more about your insights on how students can better manage time, which is, I think, one of the bigger mountain lions that is looming over them?
Okay. I think Chanel just alluded to the fact that, we're pre-programmed to look at the worst in any situation. Okay. So do you remember when you get that mark? It's 95% you get, okay? But you're focusing on the 5% that you didn't get. Right. So it's just very much, and we're always looking for threats in our world. And that's the way that, I don't know, Stone Age man or wherever we came from originally, okay, or even in the jungle, looking for all the signs which are threatening has made us survive in the way that we have. Because the really cheerful guy, he went up to the lion's den and said, "Hi, lion, what we do," and he got eaten, right? So so it's better to be a little bit more cautious, and that's how we've survived. But the thing is, to see, in today's world there aren't that many lions. All right. But the point is, we still have, although we have this wonderful technology, here I am looking, sitting in Oxford, looking at this screen with this wonderful digital camera and whatever it is. But the thing is, I've still got, my Stone Age brain. We really have not advanced that much. The structure, everything is very, very similar. We may have adapted a little bit, but we really haven't adapted that much. So the fear of the unknown, of what could be there, is the worst part. All right. So if fear is one of the key things about, for example, you're all worried about what's going to appear in that exam paper, right? Okay. But the reality is that you already encountered it somewhere in the past couple of years or 1 year or however long, this or that particular module or something like that. So rather than being debilitated by that fear, what you can do is okay, here's the thing. When my kids were little, they were frightened for me to leave the light off. Okay. So, and why is that? Anybody here is scared of the dark? Anyone? Oh, you were as a little one. Okay. Maybe we don't want to admit that we still have the light on, but, but anyway, so the thing is, we are frightened of what we cannot see. All right. But the minute we have a torch and we shed light to everywhere else, and then actually see what's actually there, it's no longer fearful. And what I'm suggesting here is that use that similar kind of principle. All right. Shed light onto the thing that scares you the most. The more you worry about it, or shut the door, or shut the book, or procrastinate, it makes the fear only worse. All right. So one of the key things that I'm suggesting that you do is, whatever that is so scary, pick it up. Be brave enough to pick it up and see, is this manageable? all right? And then break it down into the tiniest of components and then put it onto a chart so that you can now start doing one bit at a time. All right. And then this is the same kind of advice that I would give, somebody who is in a leadership position, or to a student, or to anybody who's just trying to manage their life. Break down the big mountain into the tiny bits so that you can actually manage it better. And it's no longer fearful. All right. When you have taken that torch and looked everywhere in your room and see that there are no monsters, that fear element actually goes away. And then you discover that there's another monster in another chapter, right? Okay. So use that same principle. All right. So even if you haven't got that much time left, see what you can actually get the most out of right now, and then break down that area so that you can do your really very best in that particular area that you're not quite so sure about. All right. Rather than thinking, I'm scared of that, so I'm not going to study anything anymore because I'm too terrified. So pick up, even at this last stage, pick up some of the elements that you know that you can actually manage, and then do your real best in that. Okay. But break it down into tiny, tiny components. Yeah. So every single day you allocate some time, to whatever it is that you start studying, and then basically, take a little bit at a time. Yeah. And what they're also saying is that, 20 minutes to 40 minutes is how long you can concentrate, maybe half an hour at most. So put an alarm on your fancy iPhones. I'm sure you've all got iPhones somewhere. We're talking about iPhones, even if not, okay? But basically, set a 20 or 25-minute time block, and that's all you've got to learn that particular time, that slot in, and stop. Yeah. And then do some of the exercise that Chanel was talking about, even if it is taking a skipping rope, or I don't know, kicking a ball against the wall, or anything. Just move around and then come back and be really disciplined. Okay. And I think we need to be disciplined. We can't just, pretend that someone's going to rescue us at this particular point, especially when we got exams, because there is no rescue. I'm sorry, there's no boat out there saying, yeah, here we are. I've got all the questions and the answers. Yeah. It ain't happening. Yeah. Not usually anyway. But so basically, so chop it down into bits. First of all, take your torch, look to see where the scary bits is, and then, start having a strategy and break it down into your calendar, and then work away a little bit. But set a timer for 25 minutes or so. Yeah, it's a special technique. I think it's a Pomodoro technique. That's it, Pomodoro technique. So basically, I think Pomodoro is actually a tomato, I've discovered. But anyway, don't ask me why. But basically, 20 minutes or 25 minutes, set the alarm, and then do some exercise or eat something, or what we come back, have a break. Okay. And then you'll discover that it actually goes in very fast. All right. And then you can tick things off and you're no longer scared. And then now you can move on to the next one. And procrastination, that's the way that you're going to deal with that. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. And I appreciate what you shared about taking, not just managing your life, but actually managing yourself around the time you have, and being able to break things down to small steps instead of looking at the mountain that you're to climb.
Yeah.
Speaking of mountains, then we have the biggest mountain that all students have to face at the end of the year, exams. Of course, they're leading up to the final examination date. I'm sure students who are watching this are undergoing some stressful situations, and might be wondering how they can better manage their stress, even if they are preparing. Ms. Almeida, do you have any advice to them?
Sorry, to clarify the question, Shanuka, it's mainly stress management tips,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Stress management as the exam date is coming through.
As the exam date, right. So I think it's a combination of what Dr. Chinta mentioned, which is really breaking down. See, here's the thing. You need a strategy, right? If you don't have a strategy, the fear response is going to kick in. Because as we've discussed up until now, you feel like you're under threat. Why? Because if you fail the exam, what does that mean? Existential crisis. I'm a failure. I can't be a lawyer. Oh no, right? Because all this time you put in all this money, effort, focus, energy into something that you believe is very important to your life. right? So in order for the worst case scenario not to happen, you need to prepare, which is why we say not to procrastinate. That is why the Pomodoro method that Dr. Chinta mentioned is very significant. You need to have a strategy around the next few weeks or so that is required to deliver the best possible result, right? So to manage that whole exam thing, you need to figure out, okay, this is my approach to my problem, right? Besides that, I have a suggestion which could potentially be helpful from a very mental perspective, and that is what I like to call a personal SWOT analysis, right? Now, for those of you who don't have any business acumen or background, a SWOT analysis is what you usually do for a business when you are trying to figure out the viability of a business proposal, right? That is, what are the strengths of this business proposal? What are the potential weaknesses that that proposal may have? What are the opportunities underneath that business that you can actually amplify? And what are the potential threats outside your control that might cause some competition, right? Now, if you apply that for a very personal level, it kind of puts things into a nice framework, right? As a law student, what are your strengths? And not just as any law student, but as Shanuka, what are some of your strengths? Are you someone who's good at understanding things? Are you analytical? Are you someone who's kind of calm usually? You don't really overreact unless you really have to. What are the strengths you possess as an individual, right? Be honest, because sometimes we get distracted by our weaknesses, right? Because as we've discussed, we are primed for the negative. We like to look at that 5% that we don't get, as Dr. Chinta said, right? We just want to focus on that. 20 people will tell you, you are the most fabulous moderator on earth, Shanuka. But then one person will be like, you suck, man. Right? Who are you going to remember the most? The 20 that said that you are fabulous, or one that happens to want to be a hater and say that you suck? Right? So that's why you have to manage that whole perception, right? You need to know your strengths, but your weaknesses as well. As a child, were you more prone to criticism? Did your mom or your dad tell you that, you're not smart enough? You have to be a lawyer. If you don't become a lawyer, you're a loser. Because we are all lawyers, right? That tends to be an epidemic usually. When your mom and your dad is a lawyer, you are a lawyer, right? No, I want to be an artist, mom. I want to be a musician. I want to be a rock star. You get that quizzical look, right? So you need to question, have I been primed to think that I need to be the best lawyer because my mom and dad are lawyers? Just think about that, right? What are your weaknesses? Are you afraid of failure? Because failure is not really a bad thing. As we know, as clinicians and as psychologists, we always talk about the importance of failure, right? Because it's part of growth. So really pay attention to those self-esteem issues that you might have developed as a child, right? Then we have the O, right? The opportunity part. What are some of the opportunities that you're getting right now as a law student? Are you learning things about yourself that you didn't know before? Have you figured out some of the triggers that you are generally, messed up about? How do you manage your time? Really? Are you really bad at it? Are you an emotional procrastinator because you're getting bored by the content that you're supposed to memorize, right? These are great insights. Nothing is so bad, is it? We need to know where to look, right? And last but not least, what are the potential threats? Could you be having a learning disability that is interfering with your concentration? That is something out of your control. Could it be COVID-19 and the perception that you won't get a job as a lawyer, right? That's a threat that you can't control. Job market is job market. You can't influence that. But it is a very real existential fear that you won't be employed coming to terms with it, right? That's very hard, especially when you work so hard. So the point of this framework is it helps put things into perspective. Then what you do is you integrate the coping mechanisms that Dr. Chinta and I have suggested, like exercise and activities and breathing and meditation, because those are your immediate needs. Don't forget that this is all impermanent. Your exam is not going to last forever. Neither is this anxiety. Neither is the feeling of failure if you do fail, which is highly unlikely considering how much concentration and focus law students usually put into. right? And even if you do fail, what is your game plan? That's always helpful, because the amygdala wants you to make sure that you're okay. Your life will work out. So have a plan B, perhaps, right? So that no matter what you do in your life, you can cope with the existential threat of failure. Because the fact is, failure is not detrimental. You can always figure it out. We've been through many things as a species. We've evolved for thousands and thousands of years and figured out disease and disaster, and still we've come to this day, being a very successful species, while others died out. So we have what it takes. You just need to have a plan and a strategy so that your fear subsides and you use the coping strategy to get over the immediate problem, like the exercise, like the Pomodoro, like the breathing, like the journaling. So journal. I think I would suggest every law student should journal, because it helps to filter the information, because you all have too much information overload. And I do suggest, please, if you can, for the next few weeks, when is your exam? It's in December. When is it? In Jan?
In the coming weeks, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, okay, till then, right, go on a social media detox. Please, you don't need that extra information. You don't need to know that your best friend is going to Mexico or Dubai, or I don't care where the hell they're going. Just don't pay attention to that. Get rid of that, because anything can trigger you at this point. Your focus is this strategy, right? This is what's most important. Prioritize. Mark Manson, who I think has done a fabulous job with his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, right? He very nicely explains what we as psychologists try to say, which is make priorities matter. You can't prioritize everything in your life. I'm sorry. The human brain cannot function that way. So you have to choose. Now, what matters is to passing the exam. So put all your energy, all your efforts in that, create a meaningful story around it, and have some coping mechanisms to deal and use your SWOT to manage that stress. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And of course, a special message to the audience who are watching this right now. If you do have any questions that you want to pose to our wonderful panelists, please feel free to leave it and type it in the chat box, and we'll be looking into that after the proceedings. And in that note, moving over to Dr. Zanayaka, I'm sure that you have something that you want to add to that as well. But would you please shed a little more light on the context of managing a work-life balance with student life, with bouncing off of what Ms. Almeida said?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's a really important thing to think about, I think, because as students, you're kind of in this transition period, of entering into adulthood, and, there is more to life than studies. Okay. Yeah, there is more to life than just work and so on, really. And this is the time that, nature has also, made it possible that you start noticing each other, that the world is out there and so on, really. So what I would like you to think about really is, because, if you're finding it very difficult to focus, is to think about, what would future, Shanuka want me to do today? Okay. So the future Shanuka is actually, I don't know, a leading lawyer somewhere, in the big wide world, I don't know, in corporate law somewhere, big shot. So that's my aim. Okay, so never forget where you want to be, because, and you got friends. So have a vision of who you want to be. All right, and where you are going, because sometimes I think we think of exams as just that being the biggest mountain ever. All right, I think we have been very short-sighted. All right, if you're looking at the moon, you don't even notice the mountain ahead of you. All right, and I think that's the mindset that we need to get into. So future Shanuka is actually the moon. He's on the moon one day. All right, okay, so this tiny little mountain is now a molehill. Right, and it's just a means to get to that particular point. So please focus on where it is that you want to be in the future, because I know that as young people, you keep thinking that this is it. This is the be and all of everything, and unfortunately, COVID has not shown you something differently, okay? Because you're still stuck at home. You're still doing things from the same place where you were when you were doing your A-levels, some of you probably. So probably in the same room, okay? For all we know. So nothing really has changed that much. But honestly, this is only a tiny blip in your life, all right? So please focus on that. What would future Shanuka want me to do today? All right. So I'm focusing on you, Shanuka, okay? But, I don't particularly, I'm not trying to pinpoint you here. But basically, then now you know that future Shanuka actually needs this exam to be passed. All right. So when that comes into mind, then you're taking some of the pressure off, thinking that the exam is the biggest mountain on earth. All right. This is only a means to an end to the next point. All right. So just de-stress yourself and then now start looking at what it is that I can do now to make sure that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because you just said, your exams are pretty soon, right? It's not this January, okay, Chanel. It's not. We are talking about, in a couple of weeks' time. So please detox yourself from, all kinds of technology, all right? And have a very strict, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, a very strict calendar going, a schedule, where you have slotted in time for sleep. That's important, okay, because your brain needs rest. And then you have 20-30 minute slots of your revision times, because that is the only time that we can actually be truly focused. All right, because somebody in the chat I was just reading basically saying, how can I stop my mind from wandering around? Yeah, it's when your mind starts wandering, that means you lost that sweet spot, where you are focusing. It's just saying that your brain is too tired and it wants some rest. Okay, so this is where that particular technique I was telling you about, having a time slot of 20-30 minutes where it vanishes like this. You know how when you're enjoying something, time flies? Well, when you're doing that, time will fly as well. All right. And then you won't be distracted by technology or wanting to go and eat something from the fridge because, my 20 minutes aren't up yet. Okay, so the alarm will go, and make sure it's an alarm that is not connected to your telephone, so that, when you get one of those friend requests or whatever it is from that girl or boy that you really like, all of a sudden everything goes boom. Yeah, and now you're, on your telephone. So make sure it's disconnected on that, but maybe use just the timer on it. Okay, yeah. And then you go and do some exercise or you eat something healthy. Yeah, and then come back. But make sure that you allow time for sleeping, these 20-30 minute slots only, because you have now already dissected your syllabus and you know which topics that you're going to be concentrating on, because time is running out. Okay, you haven't got, and you certainly haven't got time to procrastinate. That ship sailed. Okay, it's gone. All right, so there's no time for that either. So now you just need to get down to it. Yeah, and this is really a part, where it's really showing your mettle, as they say. Okay, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right? Yeah, they don't give up. Yeah, so so that basically they don't give up, and it's really, that's what a resilience is all about. All right, when people who are truly resilient, they just genuinely don't give up. They are just keep at it, just keep at it, and find any way that you can to make sure that you don't let anything slip, because future Shanuka will be very grateful to the present one if you put that energy in. All right, because otherwise what will future Shanuka says, will say, oh, for goodness sakes, you could have spent a little bit more time doing that, right? Yeah, and you can repent at leisure. All right, for all the things that you didn't do. But for now, think of what you will be like in, I don't know, 3 months' time, looking back on your life. It's not a very long distance to look back and see what does he or she want me to do now, and then get on with it. There is nothing short of that, right? And don't and eat healthily, please. Okay, it's very easy to order a pizza. Yeah, I think you still have pizza deliveries, right? Yeah, even during lockdown, yeah, you still have that. Okay, so please eat healthily, and I'm sure your family are there to help you in that process. Yeah, to make sure that you eat healthily and you sleep well and so on, and put any other distractions aside, because your future self will never thank you for it now.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'll make sure to keep those in heart when I'm preparing on the future weeks to come.
Good.
All right. We have a message from the audience saying, sometimes not achieving my daily goal stresses me. Is there a way I can avoid it? Ms. Almeida, would you like to take on the question?
Sorry, Shanika, I didn't hear.
Okay, let me repeat it. Sometimes not achieving my daily goal stresses me. Is there a way that I can avoid it?
So avoiding the stress of not achieving the goal. All right. So the thing is this, what is stopping you from achieving your goal? Right? You need to first identify. So the rule of thumb here is you need to first identify the problem. Whatever emotional issue that you have, you need to put a name for it. You need to first label it, right? Because that way you can tackle the problem better, right? So it's very important to ask yourself, okay, why am I not being able to achieve this goal? And is this goal actually very, very important? If the answer is yes, it is very important, then you need to figure out ways to create a task and a world around that, right? When we're talking about goals in terms of law, right, it's probably quite simple, right? You have sections, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here, right? So you will have like criminal and corporate and civil and all that kind of sections and types, right? So you need to get better at seeing what the challenges within those specific areas are. The rule of thumb is you have to add more effort to things that are harder, correct? If it's easy, you won't have to spend as much time. So you need to prioritize the goal, which is of utmost importance, also known as the most difficult, right? And you tackle that now, right? You can't, here's a problem. The human mind always thinks it has options. You need to create a scenario where you don't have any other option. If you have determined that that is a goal, see, our ancestors never had options, okay? Either you hunted for that night or you go hungry, right? Nowadays, it's maybe I'll study. If I feel like it, I will exercise. If I want to, I might do. See, that's because you have a choice. It is not existential then. That means you have if you have an option, that means it's not life or death, right? So you have to make it so important. You need to create what we call a personal narrative around the goal. Why is it important that you pass this exam? Why is it important that you do the right thing for your body and your mind? Because if you don't have a healthy mind and body, because if you don't pass this exam, you can't be that future self, which Dr. Chinta talked about. Which is why goals are there. Goals are basically stepping stones into the future, right? To build the life that we feel we want or deserve or should be living. That's why I always ask law students, and I have quite a few clients who are law students, by the way. What I have noticed is the biggest thing you all struggle with is the sense of meaning, the meaning of being a lawyer. What is it? And I always ask them, why do you want to be a lawyer? It's very important that you can answer that question. Okay, and just because I think being a lawyer is a great thing because society thinks it's great and I can make money, not selling me the point of being a lawyer, right? I'm asking you why you want it, not what society wants, not what mom and dad wants, not what culture wants. I'm asking you, why do you want to be a lawyer? Do you want it? Could it be because you want to create change in our country? Do you want to be a part of the system that gets it right? Those are, beyond just simple goals, right? So what do you have to do to get there? You need to create a story. This is how they've done research on soldiers, right? That have fought in World War I and World War II. And what they found was, it was their passion that drove them to fight. Not because they had to, not because they were drafted, but they created a story. And the Japanese army, you should study how they, train them, and the Israel army, right? There is a psychological narrative behind what they do. This is you're fighting for country and for your identity. See, when you have a story around it, it's much easier to find the drive, right? I would suggest, and I usually recommend this book to everyone. If you have time, not now, the first you study, don't read this book, please. But later on, perhaps hopefully you have passed the exams, you can give Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning a go. It's a fabulous book that helps you understand the perspective of a Holocaust survivor. While he was in a Nazi concentration camp, what he told himself so that he could get through this tough time in a concentration camp when the Nazis were obviously emotionally, physically, psychologically abusing the Jews. Great example of what the human mind can do to achieve goals of survival. So you have to create a proper story around your struggle and your goal. That is the way you don't distract yourself.
All right, thank you so much.
A follow-up question on what you said, Shannon. So you said you spoke of purpose as to why a law student wants to become a lawyer. But I have met a couple of law students who are forced into the profession due to social pressure, family pressure. So to them, what can we say as in, since they're stuck in this process, right? Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't feel motivated to study because they're forced to study.
Exactly.
So how can we help them out?
That's a very good question. So again, you need to create meaning in this meaningless situation, right? Again, that's why it's important to figure out, okay, if the reason you're doing it because of social pressure, how are you going to get it sorted so that you get through this current situation? Because the fact is, it's a temporary situation still, right? So yes, your family will judge you probably if you don't pass. But you've got to do now, because you've decided that you can't run away from your thing. You always have an option. I know it feels like you don't, but you just do. Okay. You can stand up to your family. You can say, no, I can't do this, right? Very often, if they kick you out, well, they're terrible parents, one, but B, right? They're most likely not going to kick you out. So it's always better to do the first option, which is confront and tell them, I don't want to do this. I mean, I've had many parents come to me about this situation. And I can tell you what usually what parents care about is how happy their child is, even though it doesn't seem that way. It's better you tell them now than later. Because I've really seen this, as you said. I mean, there are a lot of people in this situation, right? And then, of course, what would I do instead? Right? Some people, they don't really have a passion. They just do law because that's, a profound, prestigious thing to do, right? And that's okay. So now then that's on you. If you don't have another passion that you can replace it with, then you've got to do what you've got to do. Then it's about sucking it up, right? And focusing and creating a meaningful story around it. You don't have to love and be purposeful in being a lawyer, but you can definitely create a survival story. This is hell, perhaps, for you to study this content, but at least I will have the prestige of being a lawyer. That could be motivator enough for some people. But if the whole process is just about making your parents happy, I'm sorry, but you're on a very wrong track. It's going to be very difficult. Then you need to convince yourself that your parents' happiness is more important than your own. And perhaps it is. And no one should judge you for that. Maybe family is not your number one core value. And that's okay. That's a beautiful value to have. And maybe what your family and your culture dictates forces you to do it. The thing is, you have to make peace with that decision there. You can't beat yourself up. Then you've got to do the work that it takes. So you create another narrative telling yourself, I'm doing this because I love my family. As much as I don't enjoy this, I need to do it. And then perhaps once I pass, then I will figure out other ways to tell them that this is not what I want to do for my life. I hope that helps. I know it's a difficult one, but the stories we tell ourselves is very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't add more to that. Yeah. So, I mean, whatever it is that actually, motivates you to do it, find what it is. And like Chanel said, if it is making your parents happy, well, do your darndest to make them happy then.
True. Thank you so much. And we have a special question from our end as well. And let me introduce you to Taravi. Taravi, up to you.
Yeah, am I audible, Shanika?
Yes, it's clear.
Yes. Hi, madam. So the question is, most of the times if we have blood pressure or diabetes or whatever it is, it's very normal for us to consult a doctor. But then when we have a mental ailment or whatever it is, we tend to hesitate a bit. So what happened with me was back in 2019, I never knew that I was diagnosed with severe OCD. So that made me go to severe depression, and which made me do things that I would never do in my real life. So I think if you two can explain to the society or to those who are listening the importance of generalizing, as in it's something very normal. So if you can share your ideas on that, I think it would be great. Thank you.
Dr. Chinta?
You go ahead. Go.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fabulous question, Taravi. And I think that's why we are all in trouble these days in the first place, because it's much harder in a society which tells you, prashna ne, that's how it is here, right? It's like, there's a shame in having problems, right? There is not, I'm sorry, who here has never had a problem, never had an insecurity, never had a struggle in life, ever, and never failed and felt bad about themselves? Anyone, just anyone. I would urge you to try and identify that person, because trust me, no one knows one, someone like that. We are all in it together, right? One thing that is obvious is that we all struggle as human beings. So this is why it's so important that we normalize this. As Taravi said, this, which is ridiculous, because in a country with so many cultures, and the dominant one being Buddhism, right, which is a philosophy, right, that tells you you have to accept and not be attached to anything and not have judgment, it's preposterous that we have this stigma around mental health. It's ridiculous. Because I believe Buddha, in his own way, was possibly the first psychologist ever, right? Because he talked about middle path. He talked about the importance of balance, right? And all religions speak of that. Even Jesus talked about come as you are. That is, you be who you are. You don't have to change and pretend that you're something else unless you want to for some reason, right? So we have to normalize it, because that is paramount in a culture. Now, Dr. Chinta can tell you, in England, perhaps in the UK, it's a little less taboo, but it's still taboo from what I hear. I mean, in certain circles, right? It's not just that Sri Lanka is only closed-minded society in certain aspects. But it is a huge problem, and it's part of the massive issue as to why people don't get help. So as lawyers, you all may also have a role to play here. Because as you go into the world as being part of these legal upholders of society, right? Perhaps mental health should be part of the conversations you all have. Because the clients you all defend, prosecute, whatever it may be, the judges you deal with, the people that you work with, there's a mental aspect there, right? So mental health is paramount in all facets of our lives. So we have to talk about the fact that we all have problems. Lawyers and psychologists have that in common, right? We try to solve problems, right? Very directly in a way, right? Legal problems versus clinical problems and mental health issues. The same principle applies. You need to understand the person you're working with. So what's the point in demonizing the understanding of people? That is that the study of psychology is understanding human and animal behavior. Do you mean to tell me that there's something wrong with that? That we should not know our fellow man and woman, or they, right? We should know who people are. And that is the study of psychology, and they should be able to get help despite the stigma. And the stigma has to break, because I always like to use this conversation piece, right? As you said, Taravi, right, with diabetes and NCDs, right? You would never make fun of a person that has cancer. You would never say, why are you getting chemotherapy? That's silly, you know. Why are you taking metformin? That's stupid. Don't take metformin for diabetes. Why do we have this issue with mental health people? People with struggles of mental health? That makes no sense. It's because it's not as tangible, perhaps. Right?
It's what we
So
can't see, really, isn't it? We cannot
exactly, it's the unseen aspect.
No, indeed. I think people are very fearful of what something that they cannot see, all right, or cannot identify or put their finger on. And so people would rather just pretend it didn't exist. And it's been going on for centuries now, really, isn't it? But I think, especially where I am, dealing with diversity, that means every single way that we think adds a unique element to the way that we see the world. Okay, so it's really important, because if you're going to be functioning as a whole people, we need to be accepting these people with different sets of different skills. There are hypersensitivities in terms of, anxiety could be just, construed as being hypersensitive, in the way that we perceive the world. Yeah. So, but that is really important. All right. I mean, remember, when we were, in the wild, the people, who were on the edges of the clan would have been the people who could sense at even just twig breaking somewhere far, far away. Then you knew that the lions were coming towards you. So if we didn't rely on those people rather than the guy who slept like a log, okay, we'd all be dead, right? So this is it. I mean, we've forgotten the fact that we are all very important in what we bring to the whole equation. And just thinking that there is one standard way of doing things, I think, is where we have gone wrong. And I think maybe in the past, we did accept, in the village, of different sensitivities, even can't get the word out. But basically, somewhere, I think maybe in industrialization, we've thought that everything has to be standardized. And if it isn't, then it is a failure on the part of that. Whereas I know, like, for example, if you go to the Native Americans, in the various, the tribes that there are, they actually do value different diversities within that particular community, because every single person added something to the equation. Yeah. And they were respected for it. Because, oh, if you don't understand that, ask so-and-so, because he or she is really, really good at that kind of thing. Okay. So, and they were valued for it. But here we have, been brainwashed into thinking that there is a standard way to making every single thing. And if you don't fall into that, there is something wrong with you. So I think we have to go full circle to actually accepting everything for the modern answers that we are now looking for in globalization and so on, really. And lawyers have a big role to play. And you, as young people, you're going to be the people who are going to make the laws fit for purpose. Okay, because the old laws do not work anymore, especially if it came from England. Okay, the old colonial stuff. All right, so come on, change it. Yeah, because we need change going into the future.
No pressure, side note.
Yeah. No, there is pressure. You got a purpose there. That is your purpose. If you're looking for a purpose and you didn't know where it was, all right? You do not need to accept things the way that they are. And if you think something is wrong, I think you are more in a better position to change it than anyone else. Okay. And we need everyone on board for what's ahead of us, not just the standard cookie cutter approach of, oh, you don't look right, or you don't feel right, or whatever it is. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
True. And Tariga, I think you have something else you want to add?
Yes, one note about this whole conversation, which is very interesting. So when it took me like 4 months to get stable after going to the very severe depression. So my parents really supported a lot. And then when I tried to make the other people aware, of course, within the limitations that I have. So other than my parents, everyone was around me. The therapist who was treating me back then also like, why are you telling these things in open public? They would think like, they would never hire you. So this thing, this mental state was coming from my therapist itself. And my only argument was, if I was like a cancer survivor or something, then they would be like, oh my God, you did something great. So why is there this disparity? Is there anything that we can do about it? And one
Yes.
thing too, what you said, Ms. Almeida, about Lord Buddha, adding to it, so how he treated Patachara and Kisa Gautami, he never preached, he just treated them with kindness. Yes.
True. Thank you so much, Taravi, for sharing that. And we appreciate your openness for sharing that small information about yourself. And we are actually running out of time right now, ladies and gentlemen. And so one more quick question before we wrap things up. We have an audience question that is asking how and what options do law students or any student in that sense has to find help, even if it's like sometimes finances might be an issue. So is there an affordable option for students to approach even if they need assistance for it?
Try Kalyana. Kalyana will connect you to whatever resource that you need, whether it's free or whether it's paid. I'm sure they have the connections that you'll need. It is one platform that I do endorse because I think they have a great framework. They're very open. And what they do is they try to find the right fit. And you don't have to pay them directly for anything. You just have to create that association and connection with them, and they will provide you a solution. So I would suggest go through Kalyana. And of course, I'm trying to think of all the other free, affordable. See, here's the thing. You can also go digital because there are a lot of great free apps like Headspace that I can recommend. There's also BetterHelp, which can connect you on a digital platform. And they make it an international forum where you can actually connect with therapists all over the world. I'm hoping it works for Sri Lanka because when I was introduced to it, it was in the US. But I'm sure there are ways around it because it's digital. But I would start with the resources that you have in terms of connection itself, right? So for example, you can ask your GP someone that is affordable, or you can, go to some place like Kalyana and Google it and check to see if there are any affordable options. The fact is there is no one size fits all, right? You need to figure out what is really, really important to you. And depending on your situation, you need to find the right fit. For example, Taravi's therapist was not helping. Yeah. And I don't like to say that about a fellow colleague, but she was wrong. Okay.
And I think that's a really important point. I mean, there's a whole gamut of people who will say that they will charge you very little. Okay. But the point is, I think we got to value. I mean, would you go to, if you have cancer, would you go and say, you know what, I want the cheap option. Can you just give me something to do this or whatever it is? Or I have diabetes. Can you just give me the cheapest thing that you got on your shelf? Right. The thing is, you see, I'm not saying that just because you pay a lot, you get the best. Okay. But find out, what the credentials are. Honestly, I cannot stress enough. People should be qualified to deal with other people's vulnerabilities. And it is a specialist skill. And what this particular person did and said, I cannot endorse at all. Honestly, this is not okay. All right. And that is quite upsetting to think that there are people who will do this because you're not helping, you're actually adding to their burden, and that's not fair. But I am hearing a lot about that as well. So please be careful where you go. All right. Do your research. And I think I've looked at Kalyana's website, to be honest. They do say about some of the credentials of the people that I'm not just pushing Kalyana here, but to be honest, I think it's coming from a very good place. And otherwise, I wouldn't really be doing this with Kalyana. And nor would you, Chanel, okay? Because, we are giving our time because we think it's really well worth it, and others are doing the same thing, all right? So please look at the credential. You would not say to go to a heart surgeon and said, I looked up and you were the cheapest, so I'm coming to you, all right? Would you do that? No. So please value your mental health because it is as important as the rest. So invest in it.
I couldn't say it better. Absolutely. Don't be cheap on your mind. Your mind is really important, just as your body. So give the same respect and value that you give your mind, your body, your mind. Same thing.
Yeah. And you
Thank
can
you so much.
negotiate. You can negotiate with your
Exactly.
therapist. Okay, so if you do find somebody, try and negotiate something.
Work through it. If it's really a problem,
negotiate.
I have one last question. Now, since we are a law student body, so we encourage people to, a sense of teamwork. We encourage that kind of community development as well. And if in case you see your friend going through something, how can a law student react, and how can that law student help that friend going through a mental traumatic experience? If you can guide us through that as well.
I think just briefly in here, the first thing that most friends need is a listening ear. All right, just to feel listened to and to understand that there is someone that they can go to, because the way the brain works is kind of amazing. All right, because when we are thinking something in our head, we are in a loop. We cannot get out. But when we say something and we hear that same words coming through our ears, it just seems that it goes into a different space in our head, okay, in our brain. All right, so simply listening to somebody else and maybe asking sympathetic questions so that they can help figure out why something is happening. So this is Socratic questioning. Is I'm sure you know this more than anybody else as lawyers. Okay, I'm sure you've done this. So basically trying to get a little bit more clarity for that particular person so that they're hearing it in a different angle. And I mean, we are giving our secrets away here, Chanel, aren't we? To a certain extent, because that's what we do. Okay, we help them understand what the problem is and hear it themselves, because often the person has the answers that you don't. All right, so you cannot necessarily come with solutions, and if you're tempted to have solutions for them, just put it more as an option than you should do this. Because unfortunately, if that person doesn't do it, then when that person comes back to you, you'll be saying, well, hell, I told you what to do, right? And you didn't do it. So they're less likely to come back to you. But that means that they're more isolated. Okay. So use your lawyer thinking and the way that you ask questions to get more out of that person so that they hear it. Because sometimes when they hear some of the nonsense that they're saying, they themselves think, God, that is rather daft. You're right. Why did I even think that? Yeah. So sometimes just simply listening is the good thing. All right. But if you feel they're in danger, then you must get some professional help for them, or find somewhere of getting, this is like, life-threatening situations. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dissanayake, for that. And I guess I do have to clarify the previous question. I was speaking more on a student's perspective who might not be willing to open up to their parents about what they're going through, and who would want to seek help alone without involving their parents. But speaking of parents, how do you think a parent or parent would play into this situation, and what influence do they have in their life? For you, Dr. Dissanayake.
Okay. I think parents have a role to raise adults. Okay. And one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again is really like, I'm raising children. Well, I think parents themselves need to move away from that mindset and actually think about the fact that they're raising adults, full-grown human beings who can take part in this whole world. All right. So I think, parents should offer support so that, you are allowed to fail. Little failures are okay. And that's part of what resilience is. As parents, we have to make our children more resilient. Resilience simply means that they can bounce back up, with proper kind of balanced mental thinking about the processes, and then try again. Okay, so parents can actually help children and young people as they grow up, through little challenges. All right, and also allow them the opportunity to excel at things. And that doesn't mean that the only way that you can please me, me being parent, is by getting top grades in your at college or university or A-levels or whatever. No, but simply doing things for yourself, all right, and others, and so on. So social parts of competence has to be actually encouraged as well. And I think that self-sufficiency is that means taking care of your whole self, yeah, including cooking, including keeping yourself clean. All those things are really, really vital. All right. And I know that in Sri Lanka, they think that, doing that is a terrible thing. Okay. It's like almost child abuse, right? If I told you to clean up your room, yeah, that's like child abuse. But no, it's really important, because that means you're now getting geared up for, adult life, and making sure that you can manage things better for yourself. And every time that a young person does something that is unexpected, remind them, you know what, last year you couldn't do this, but this year, look how far you have come. Because as young people, you have no idea of how far you're going. Because for goodness sakes, you don't even look the same as last year, right? Because you've changed, because you're just growing up. So basically, how can you keep a track of, how you mentally grown in that process? So I think it's kind of nice if parents can remind young people, you've come a long way. Yeah, you couldn't do this last time, and look at you now, right? And that builds courage and confidence. And I think that's really a major part of what a parent's role is. We are not raising children, we are raising adults. And if they can support you in ways, I think it's really important.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I'm sure that whoever had posted that question on chat found an answer through your comments. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this special live stream. There were so many more questions, but sadly we cannot answer more due to time constraints. And however, we would like to talk more about this subject and in the future. And hopefully we hope that you would also be with us too in the coming days. Dr. Desai Naikar and Ms. De Almeida, thank you so much for joining us and providing your valuable insights. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And
wish you all the very best. Okay, go for it. Go get it.
Yeah, good luck, guys.
Reach. Yeah, it's within reach. You can do it. Go for it. All right.
Thank you very much for the positive energy.
You can do it. You can do it. Remember, the future of the country is on your shoulders.
No pressure. No pressure.
No pressure. And no, bring yourselves into the future. And I think then if you did, the place will be in much, much better stead. So
true. And we also have to thank Rekha from Kalyana for making this possible today. And we couldn't have done this without you guys. So thank you everyone for this special live stream, and we appreciate your presence. And we hope for that all of you who had taken part and been part in this wonderful discussion found something that can enrich your own lives and your own student experience for the future and to reach that moon. And that concludes our webinar, and we hope to see you once again. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
hey, can I share my screen to let us know how you're feeling now? Yeah?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
Please, let me do that. Okay, so anyone, please, this is how we started. All right, and I'd like you to say now, how are you feeling now? Please give us some feedback. You can use www.menti.com and use the code 82650715.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, so anybody who's on Facebook can also type in this, okay? So www.menti.com and use the code 82650715, please. Don't go away, okay? Please give us some feedback. How are you feeling right now? Because remember, articulating and talking about how you feel is really important, being able to identify what it is you're feeling.
Validation.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so that is really good. So you're feeling hopeful. So wish you all the very best. There is help out there, so please know that. And Kalyana is a fantastic starting point. If you don't use it, they keep saying, you lose it. So I think it's really important that,
I like that.
So something like Kalyana, please use it, because there are a lot of people putting a lot of energy into trying to be helpful for this very situation. So please, spread the word and use the facilities. And if you can't afford something, negotiate with your therapist. Okay. But please, please, please pick somebody who is qualified and who is capable of doing this. So you can carry on putting your words in, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen, but you can continue doing that. So thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good
Take
night.
care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.